Well, last time I saw you, I started on this subject of Buddhist Feng Shui. Some of you joined me for that talk. Others may be new to the subject completely. Feng Shui is something you might have heard of before. Probably in your mind it's something vaguely Chinese, maybe to do with the layout of your home, maybe to do with not leaving the bathroom door open, I don't know, or some special energy that helps to bring vitality into your life. But within the Buddhist understanding of the things that make a real difference to our location, especially in terms of how conducive they are to our spiritual cultivation, then Feng Shui has a very specific meaning. And last time I talked about there being 4 factors of conducive location as they relate to being amenable to your spiritual cultivation. So, to put it more simply being in the right place will help your spiritual cultivation if it has these 4 factors. If you're lucky or if you've managed to choose such a place, then any effort that you put into your spiritual cultivation will be rewarded particularly easily. And the 4 things which I'm talking about are the location itself. The second thing is the readily available nature of food in that place. The third thing is the other people who populate that location. And the last thing is the availability of Dharma teachings or teachings about the truth of life or the truth of cultivating the mind. On those 4 levels, of course, they will differ depending on the level of description that you are talking about. If you're talking about it on the national level, then things like location will mean all sorts of things like what countries are on your borders, for example, whether you have a seaboard. If you're talking about it on the level of the region, then it might be down to things like your communications. Might be down to whether you have broadband available. If you come down to the level of the community, then it might be the sort of schools in your area. And if you come down to the level of the household, then within the walls of your own house, even on this micro level, the conducive location still has meaning, but it might be down to the characteristics of the people in your family, or it might be down to the ventilation in your home, or whether it has enough space to receive guests, for example. So, depending on the level you're talking about, then the way you interpret these 4 factors will be adapted accordingly. So, that was what we talked about last time. What I'm going to talk about this time round is perhaps a little bit more applied. And what I'm going to do is to see how these 4 factors can be helpful to us if, to give a little example, we were choosing a new location for our house. Yeah? So here we go. For those of you who have ambitions in the direction of being a realtor, being a real estate agent, then this might be particularly helpful to you to give you a new perspective on the Dharma suitability of particular new properties. So we come to our first example, and this place is called Hillywood. And in your mind, remember those 4 factors and think about the description of this place. And if you are going to use these 4 factors, then you might, for each factor, choose how you would rate that factor on out of 25 points. So 4 points times 25 to give a rating out of 100 for each place. So here we go. Hillywood. It's liable to earth tremors. It has plenty of job opportunities. It has a low crime rate. It has markets nearby for your food. It has good free medical care. It even has monks that pass by the house on alms round. So, what do you reckon? If you were to factor in all the 4 factors, then you would get something like this. As an example, for location, conduciveness, you probably get 18 out of 25 because of earth tremors, a little bit worrying, right? But plenty of job opportunities would sort of make up for some of that. So maybe you get a job fixing the roads every time they crack in an earthquake. Yeah. Food, we know it has nearby markets, so that's good, right? So 18 out of 25. Good people, well, medical care comes under the category of people because having doctors and medics around generally is a good thing. So we give that 18 out of 25. And monks passing by an alms round is the opportunity to give alms, to practice generosity on a regular basis. So that would be very good from the point of view of accumulating dharma or accumulating merits in life. So full marks for conducive dharma. So out of a total of 100, in this particular case, this worked example would give it 79%. Get the idea? Let's try another one. Now we come to Manhattan. Okay. So, worked example again. Unfortunately, Manhattan is infested with malarial mosquitoes. Not good, right? So you can take your quinine injections every day or whatever, but it doesn't really make it very welcoming. Nonetheless, it has abundant food. It has no nearby red light districts or nightclubs. You probably wouldn't want your children going and playing around nearby. But it has schools and temples in the locality. And it has a low crime rate. So what do you reckon? Better or worse than the last one? Malaria doesn't make it sound very good, right? Yeah. So location doesn't get very many marks. Despite not having the red light districts or nightclubs nearby, the malaria does add up to a bit of a downer. So we only give it 5 out of 25 there. Food is abundant, so that's good, right? 22 out of 25. People, what are we looking at there? We have temples and schools in the locality, which generally add up to a positive thing in terms of opportunities, both for our children and for ourselves to educate ourselves to become better people. And the low crime rate generally also talks about good people. As for Dharma, well, that comes back to the temples and schools mostly, the availability of teachings to further our own spiritual improvement. Nonetheless, we add them all together, we get only 67, which is a bit less than Hillywood. So you might be able to put this Dharma teaching into practice next time you move house. But the things I want to teach today really shouldn't have to wait until next time you move house in order to have some sort of benefit for you. And in this particular case, I would say that although for, let's say, children or people who are very new to the path, depending on ready-made locations to improve your chances of success in Dharma practice is a good thing. But really, for folks like yourself who are experienced and regular meditators and all these other things, really you should be looking not just at ready-made, good, conducive locations, but you should be looking at how you can take what you already have and improving the factors on those 4 different categories in order to make what you have better. So what can we do about that, especially on the household level? Because households tend to be more within our control, unless you happen to be a city councillor or something. So how can we transform things? The Feng Shui of your home as a location conducive to good habits for yourself. The first consideration is you need to give thought to your work-life balance so that you can spend enough time, let's say with your own children, to instill them with good habits. Some people claim that they are overburdened with work, and they even claim that the reason they are working so hard is because they're thinking of their children and all the money their children need, so they can send them to a private school or maybe even a boarding school. In fact, maybe the things of value which you can give your children don't need to depend on all that money. If you had quality time with your children, you could do a lot for them, which money would be unable to buy. In fact, if you don't spend time with your children, then you might end up spending all your money on things like rehab or summer camps for troubled teens instead. But if you can rearrange your time to give full attention and quality time to your children's upbringing, then your foray into parenthood will be much more rewarding. Yeah. Second thing, with the tagline that the family that eats together stays together, with this comes a theory that there ought to be at least 1 mealtime per day when the whole family sits down to eat together. This is something we've returned to in blessing number 12. But as a parent, because you need to be looking out for the sort of good or bad habits that your children are acquiring, then you need the opportunity to get up close and observe what is actually happening with your children on quite a regular basis. And there's no better time than to sit down to a meal together, where things of this nature can come up in conversation, and as the adult in the room, then you have the chance to sort of give some guidance on these sort of matters as well, things which your children maybe ought to be improving upon. A third thing in the formation of good habits is that you need to accept that money can't buy everything. Having meals together is great, but the sort of nourishment that children need is not just the food on their plates, but it's many other things. If you think about all the media and games and things, screen time, you can think about all the other so-called foods which you need to keep an eye on as a concerned parent these days. So encouraging your children to read, even if it's Harry Potter, is a very important function in making the children's environment more amenable. Would you believe that there's some educational psychologists who did a very simple thing, which was count the number of books on shelves in each person's home, and they could find a link between the educational level which the children in that home achieved at the end of their education by the number of books in the home. So it doesn't matter whether they actually pick up the book and read them or not, or even if it's like trash. Just the fact that books are there somehow sends out some sort of little vibrations that manages to put an educational ethos into that home. Yes. And sitting down to meditate together is another thing, which of course would be very inspiring for children, even if the children might not sit for as long as the adults in any particular home. Apart from this, one other thing, which we have a very nice poster for just over there, is to transform our homes into a more amenable place. More recently, the whole idea has been examined in more detail by our teachers in Thailand, and the way they have concluded that we upgrade our homes is a way to cultivate the Noble Eightfold Path, which you will have heard about in Buddhism, right? Can be remembered by a sort of 5x5 approach, which means there are 5 sorts of universal goodness or habits to be cultivated, and 5 categories of spaces in our homes and our work lives where they need to be cultivated. So 5 habits applied in 5 different places in our homes and in our workplaces. The base of 5 universal goodness habits include cleanliness, tidiness, being polite, being punctual, and cultivating meditation or a longer attention span. So those are then put into practice in 5 different spaces within our homes and our lives, which are our bedroom, our bathroom, dining room, which includes the kitchen and the living room, the place that we get dressed, and our place of work. For example, if we were to take our bedroom and we wanted to apply punctuality to our bedroom, in this particular case, then we would cultivate the habit of waking up on time. Yeah? That's how it would work. It's a whole lecture for another time, but that is a really important way in which you can take what you have as a home, as a house, and turn it into something that is really a place which can improve and upgrade your level of habits and spirituality in life. So, what are the relative importance of the 4 conducive location factors? In conclusion, a conclusive location has 4 factors: conducive location, conducive food supply, conducive personnel, and conducive dharma. If you put these 4 characteristics in order of importance, as with many lists in Buddhism, normally the one that comes at the end will be the most important one. And in this case, it's the dharma, which is the most important one, followed by personnel, followed by food, funnily enough, followed by the location itself. It's the least important of the 4. Even though location and food supply may not be ideal, but if the inhabitants are conducive, and then they can soon improve the quality of the location and the food. However, the thing that makes the people in the place conducive is having spiritual teachings in their heart. So this is the reason why we say that Dharma teachings or spiritual teachings are the most important factor in any location. So, as not to patronize you too much, as with all the previous blessings we've looked at, generally we tend to pay a lot of attention to how these things are applied in the world around us. But as with the others, there are 2 levels of description, even for conducive location. And in this particular case, we can say that conducive location, of course, applies to the things around us, but it also applies to our body and our mind as well. So the conducive location within. In fact, our interior condition can be conducive or otherwise to our cultivation, even more than our surroundings in certain cases. Having a healthy body and mind is particularly important to one's potential in spiritual cultivation. If we're not weakened or infected in some way, then we can do a lot more with our lives and be more ambitious in our cultivation. Even people born with all the advantages in life may take their health for granted and get mixed up in things like addictions. But if instead we're able to uphold precepts, then it's a very good way to make sure our internal amenable location is as conducive as possible. And there's an expression within Buddhism: if you take care of your precepts, then your precepts will take care of you. So now that you know 4 factors of a conducive location, if you are still a child, then you should settle for a location that is going to be conducive for you. But if you are an adult, as you like yourself, then you should try to make your location, whatever you have, more conducive than it was before. It's not good enough just to look for conducive locations, but you should be thinking of in terms of improving the places that you already have. So today I'd like to finish off with a little story. It's a sort of shaggy dog story for you. And it's a story from the scriptures taken from the commentary to the Dhammapada. It's a story which comes from a time long before the time of the present Buddha. You're familiar with the idea of there having been many Buddhas. But at the time I'm going to talk about, it was a time when there were no fully enlightened Buddhas available. The only Buddhas available at the time were what were known as silent Buddhas or Pacceka Buddhas. So they're beings who have become fully enlightened but who don't have the knowledge or capability to communicate what they know to other people. So they're just enlightened, which is great, but and they are a very great opportunity for merit for other people, but they don't communicate what they know to others. So these Pacceka Buddhas, and at this time there were many Pacceka Buddhas in the world. There can be several at once, and one of these Pacceka Buddhas used to come on alms round to the dwelling of a certain herdsman. And having collected alms, then the Pacceka Buddha would make a long journey back to the forest where he used to stay to have his meal. So to save him repeated journeys, then the herdsman invited this particular Pacceka Buddha to spend the rainy season nearby his own house and pledged to bring the midday meal to him every day. And he kept his promise, and he brought lunch each day for the Pacceka Buddha, and often he was accompanied by his dog. So any day when the herdsman was not free to bring the offering himself, then he would send his well-trained dog to carry the sort of little lunchbox to offer to the Pacceka Buddha in his place. And as the dog grew more familiar with the Pacceka Buddha, then he started to take a liking to this Pacceka Buddha, because the manner and the deportment of the Pacceka Buddha, being sort of fully enlightened and all that, was very gentle. For example, if the dog was at home and he failed to bring firewood for his master, sometimes he would be punished. But the Pacceka Buddha never punished the dog. He always treated the dog gently. And the dog liked to listen to the sound of the Pacceka Buddha doing chanting, and there was no risk of being beaten, and sometimes the Pacceka Buddha would even save a portion of the food to give to the dog as well. So the dog became more and more familiar with the gentle manner of the Pacceka Buddha. And at the end of the rainy season, the Pacceka Buddha bid the herdsman goodbye and returned to the forest. And the Pacceka Buddha made his journey not in the normal way, but floating through the air, through the powers of mental powers which he had achieved through enlightenment. And the dog watched the Pacceka Buddha go through the air with such regret that he howled mournfully. And it was a sad farewell for the dog who still had the Pacceka Buddha in its heart. So even a dog can feel sad about the departure of a monk. In fact, the dog was so sad that it dropped dead with a broken heart. However, as with many of the stories I tell, as a result of the faith of this dog in the Pacceka Buddha, and from howling in the departure of the Pacceka Buddha, the dog was reborn immediately as as an angel called Ghosaka in the second level of heaven. And because this angel had such a great voice, which sort of carried over from the previous lifetime, then its duty was to be the spokesman for the rest of the angels. And in the time of the present Buddha, so this is a long time in the future, but coincides with our present, this particular angel was reborn as a human being this time in the human realm in the time of the present Buddha as a merchant known as Ghosaka again, who was one of the greatest patrons of Buddhism in his time. So it can be seen, this is the sort of the punchline as it were, that the result of living in a conducive location, made conducive by having a Pajeka Buddha on your doorstep, yeah? So conducive personnel, conducive dharma, and having the chance to support the Pajeka Buddha led him from quite a lowly rebirth as a dog to be reborn first as an angel in the second level of heaven, and then in the time of the Buddha as an important patron for Buddhism. Yeah. So just to finish off with a few little announcements. The classes here take place on Tuesday every week between 7 and 8:30, and every Thursday between 7 and sometimes it goes on until 9. Thursday evening generally has a slightly longer meditation and more on Buddhist content. And apart from that, we also have online teachings available on Saturdays between 7 and 8 for anyone who's unable to come in person, either with myself or with our colleague in the Netherlands, the Venerable Sander, on alternating Saturdays. And on the full moon days, we also have a special session, which happens to align this month with the 18th of December. So we have it here. It involves lighting candles and so on, but it's also held online for others who are logging in from around Europe. This full moon day of December, we have the theme of family harmony in the holiday season. And even for those of you unable to visit the temple but who'd like to sustain the habit of meditation in your daily lives, there is an app called MindGem which you can download onto your mobile phone and listen to meditation instruction offline even, and set the timer for the length of time you'd like to meditate. Even if the instruction is shorter, then you can sort of set like half an hour of silent time in your meditation in order to bring it up to 30 minutes each time you meditate, for example. So that one is available for anyone who's interested in cultivating meditation in their everyday lives, apart from coming to the center here. So for today, that's everything I had planned to say, but at this time, if anyone has any questions, comments or feedback they'd like to share, then this would be a good opportunity to do so. Yes, go on. Yes, you can. So the book was Walpola Rahula's What Buddha Taught? Yes. Five Aggregates was a bit heavy. Well, it's not that difficult to understand. Basically, you have body and you have mind. Five aggregates are the physical body, just the first one, and then all the other four are qualities of mind. So what you have, Vedana, Sanya, Sankhan, Vinyan. Yes? Pali. And within our own tradition, often those are translated a little bit more easily as perception, memory, thought, and cognition. So 4 things together make mind, and the other one is your physical body. I don't know if that answers your question. Yeah, this is not the sort of thing I normally give a talk on, apart from saying there's body and there's mind. And it's great to know that you can go in more detail with the mind if you feel so inclined. But really what you're dealing with is the mind as a whole. And all those 4 things are normally brought together in one place in order to work with the mind. So there's no point in separating them out. Yeah. It's the same reason I don't go into dependent origination.